Welcome to the Unstressed Exec, the podcast where we dive deep into the real conversations that help you lead, love, and live with greater clarity, courage, and calm. I'm your host, Dr. George Vergolias, executive coach and clinical forensic psychologist, and I help high-achieving professionals navigate life transitions, resolve conflict with confidence, and build unshakable psychological resilience. So if you're ready to lead with purpose, master conflict with grace, and become more emotionally agile under pressure, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Unstressed Exec. I'm your host, Dr. George Vergolias, executive and resilience coach, forensic psychologist, and someone who's had the honor of walking alongside hundreds of high performers who carry enormous emotional loads, often in silence. Today is episode number 10, and I'm taping this on July 4th, Independence Day in the US. And in some way, this episode is also about independence. How do we break free from being the stable factor in the lives of those around us? And it's not about how do we give up being that factor, but when we feel the immense pressure of being that stable factor, how do we work with that and break free from that? The fixer, the rock, the person who makes the hard calls, solves the problems, and holds everything together. It might be you. If so, this episode is then for you. It also might be somebody in your life. And certainly, please share this with someone you think needs to hear it. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. When you're always the strong one, you start to forget you are allowed to be human. You start thinking that you have to be superhuman. You start having comments like, it is what it is. If I don't do it, who will? If I can't hold it together, nobody can. And while there might be some truth to that, it still sets you up on a path where you are simply going to crash into the wall eventually. And when that happens, you won't be good to anybody. So if you're always the strong one, it's important to take some insights from this episode that can help you move forward. Today, we'll explore the hidden emotional toll of strength, how we define strength, and the psychological trap of unrelenting reliability, and how to shift toward shared strength and sustainable resilience. We all understand this when we think of elite sports. I've said this metaphor before, but if somebody like LeBron or Serena Williams pulls a hamstring, you're not going to be expecting them the next day to be training at 100%. They might even miss a tournament, or they might miss some games because they know they need to recuperate before they can bring their A game back to the court or back to the field. So let's get into it. First, let me unpack the archetype of the strong one, and let's define what we mean by that. It's not just someone who handles stress well. It's the person who feels responsible for everyone else's emotional survival. Let me say that again. It's the person who feels responsible for everyone else's emotional survival. This archetype often shows up in a few different ways. Number one, the eldest sibling who had to grow up too fast. Another example is you could be the youngest sibling who was the silent observer of all the family drama, the one who had to watch one by one siblings leave the home and carry the emptiness of that space. Maybe you were the high-performing executive who's seen unshakable and carries the burden of being the stalwart role model for everyone else, unable to show chinks in your armor. Or you're the partner who keeps the household afloat emotionally and financially, who everyone depends on for stability. Or lastly, you could be the friend who gives support, but rarely asks for it back or rarely receives it back. And culturally, we reward this role. We admire people who are stoic under pressure, who are composed during chaos, who are always there and present and seem to be able to handle things. But this praise creates a trap. And the trap is you become so good at holding it together that no one checks to see if you are falling apart. In some ways, I was like that when I was young. My father died when I was 22 years old. I was in grad school. And we went through the entire process of supporting my mother and my three older sisters and kind of working through that whole process of him slowly dying of cancer and then working our way through the funeral. And in Chicago, I grew up in Chicago, we had wakes. So the viewing or the wake, and then the funeral, and then just the whole process of transferring documents into my mother's name and helping her with all of that. And it was weeks later that my second oldest sister leaned over to me one night and just said, "Hey, how are you doing? How are you?" And it was weird because no one asked me that. All through the time of my father having cancer, and then the very end, and then watching the end, and then navigating the funeral and all the events, and then navigating all the transfer of the monies and the life insurance and all the things. No one stopped until my second oldest sister stopped and asked me that. So there is the trap of becoming so good at holding it together that no one checks. No one checks in on you to see how you're doing. This is what I call emotional invisibility. You're seen as capable, competent, calm. And because of that, people stop seeing you as needing anything. It's the caregiver paradox. The more competent you appear, the less you care or the less care that you receive. And there's another truth here. Many times, these people I just mentioned are like a fruit tree, meaning they have things to give, they have sustenance to offer others. But remember, the fruit is not for the fruit tree. It doesn't live on fruit. The tree lives on water. The fruit is for those who pass by underneath. That's why you can give advice to someone on the phone late at night, and that will spin their life for the best and turn their life around. And 5 minutes after that, you hang up, you're crying in your bed. And you're thinking, damn, I should have took that advice myself. Your gifts are not for you. Your gifts are for others who pass by in your life, who orbit you in your life, just like the fruit is not for the fruit tree. So that's why it is so important to replenish. And we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about kind of how we can recognize and avoid that emotional invisibility trap. And there's a toll to that. There's a toll to being that, right? The hidden toll is something we need to talk about, and the emotional role that it costs you. There's 4 things I want to highlight. The first is it suppresses emotional needs. You learn to put your needs last. You may even forget what they are. Over time, this erodes your emotional clarity and self-connection. Number 2, you develop chronic burnout. You keep pushing through exhaustion because everyone depends on me. Burnout doesn't just happen, though, to people doing too much. It happens to people carrying too much emotional weight. Another way I've heard it described is that you're not burned out because you're doing too much. You're burned out because you're not doing enough of what makes you come alive. Because when we're busy doing things that excite us, that replenish us, that make us come alive, we actually get more energy, not less. The third hidden toll is bitterness and resentment. Eventually, if you're one of these people, you begin to feel underappreciated. You may love the people in your life deeply, but there's a growing sense that nobody really sees you or sees what you're holding or sees what you're contributing. And over time, that becomes a silent burden, and it again becomes this emotional invisibility. Number 4, eventually there's a loss of identity. Your sense of self becomes tied to what you do for others, not who you are. Men in particular, we are prone to this because we tend to identify, and society identifies us this way. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but we identify as being the protector, the provider, the sustainer. And again, I think there's an important role for that. And in no way am I saying that women can't do those things. I'm not saying that, but it's hard grained in our DNA as men. But over time, when all we've identified with is what we do for others, it takes a big toll when we are sidelined, or when we can't do for others, or when we can't sustain that level of doing because we're burned out. And then most importantly, it also leads to emotional collapse. If this pattern continues unchecked, it often leads to emotional breakdown. Not always a dramatic breakdown, but numbness, detachment, or a deep sense of isolation. And again, women are not immune to this, but men in particular feel these emotions at this stage: numbness, detachment, and a deep sense of isolation, which, ladies, most of the time we as men are not going to verbalize. We're just going to go covert. We're going to go silent on you. I think that most of the time you guys will see that, meaning the ladies, the women will see that for the men in their life. I've had a lot of clients say to me things like, I don't know who I am when I'm not helping someone else. Or even worse, they'll say something like, I kept it together for everyone else, but now I don't know how to keep going. These aren't outliers. These are high functioning, high performing people, leaders, partners, parents, founders, coaches, all of the above. So, how do we get here? Well, part of it begins with this cultural myth of strength and what we identify strength with. Why is this pattern so hard to break? Because it's reinforced by culture. In the US and many parts of the world, we equate strength with silence, endurance, self sacrifice, independence. This is especially true for men who are often taught from childhood, don't cry, don't talk about your feelings, don't ask for help, suck it up. But it's also true for women, especially women of color, who are often expected to be strong by default, to carry families and communities and workplaces with little emotional support. Add to that workplace dynamics, such as leaders are expected to be unshakable. Managers are told to set the tone and not show weakness. Mental health days are offered, but using them can be quietly judged, and in some cultures, could even stilt your career advancement. It all adds up to this unspoken message. If you want to be trusted, you can't fall apart. There's a lot of lip service these days. And if you go on LinkedIn, you'll see it all the time. And I talk a lot about workplace resilience, but I talk about it in a much more hardcore, realistic way. There's a lot of lip service, though, given to this notion of resilience, but it's often defined in a way where resilience is about never breaking down. In reality, resilience is about two things. One, it's about developing strength and grit and tenacity so that we break down less. That's true. But it doesn't mean we will never break down. The other part of resilience, which I think is the important part of resilience, is that when we do break down, when we do fall, when we do falter, we're able to get back up more quickly, recover more quickly, and be stronger than we were before. So it's not about not falling apart. It's about limiting that, yes, developing strength and grit and tenacity, but it is about when we do fall, we can recoup and get back on track. So what happens when the strong one breaks? Well, let's get real. Let's get raw here. What happens when that strong one in your life, could be your father, it could be your mother, it could be a sister, whoever it may be, what happens when they finally break? And sometimes it looks like a few different things. It might be a panic attack in the middle of a meeting, or it might be a panic attack in the bathroom stall that no one else sees, that you were able to see it coming, but you were able to get away. Crying alone in your car because you can't name what's wrong. Blowing up at a partner over something trivial. Feeling like you've lost your purpose or your passion or your connection to others. Could be these, and it could be many other manifestations or expressions. Research shows that people in high stress caregiving or leadership roles experience delayed onset trauma symptoms. Why? Why is that? It's because they're suppressing their emotions in real time. They're putting out fires instead of processing the heat. Eventually, the body and mind say, no more. I don't want to be this person anymore. The actor Jim Carrey was quoted. I saw this interview from a few years back. He has a great saying. He says, grief and sadness is about losing something and grieving over something that you lost. Could be a death of a loved one, could be the death of your dog, it could be that job that you really love that got shut down, a best friend moving across the country. That's sadness. He said depression is when your body, your soul grabs you by the shoulders and shakes you and says, I don't want to be this person anymore. I don't want to play this role anymore. And that's one of the things that we find when the strong one breaks. They are in this role of caregiver, this role of doer and protector, and they don't have the luxury of feeling the emotions. And what happens is once they get out of that role, the breakdown happens later. This is why some of the strongest people you see who navigate loss, like death of a parent, death of a spouse, even death of a child, they will be super strong throughout the process, throughout the funeral, and for weeks after, they will hold it together. But you might see a couple to several weeks later is when they finally break. When all the work is done, when all the logistics have been handled, when all the arrangements have been done, and now they're getting back to their life. And they're sitting in that quiet moment at 11 at night, and the house is quiet. That's when they break. So how do we reclaim our shared strength? This notion that I don't have to carry everything alone. So what do we do about that? Well, it starts with we need to reframe what we mean by strength. And this is how I would recommend reframing it. And I do a lot of this in my coaching work. Real strength is saying, I'm not okay. Real strength is letting someone else lead occasionally. Real strength is admitting that you have limits as well. It is vulnerability, yes, but it's strength in vulnerability. It's not weakness. And here are 4 ways to start sharing your strength. First, identify your support gaps. It's so critical to understand what resources you have before you. So ask yourself, who checks on me? Who knows what I'm really carrying? Who would I call if I were in crisis? Number 2, practice micro receiving. What do I mean by micro receiving? Let someone do something small for you. Let them carry a bag, let them cook a meal, let them listen without fixing it. It actually trains your nervous system to accept care. It trains your nervous system to take off the armor of I'm the fixer, I'm the solver, I'm the doer, lay it down and let somebody else, even for a moment, carry that burden. And you don't have to do it with the heavy shit. You could start with super small things around the house. Number 3, start reciprocal conversations. Instead of just saying to the listener something like, where you're just talking, say something like, can I share something I'm struggling with? And then listen to what they have to share as well about what they might be struggling with. That way you're having reciprocal conversations. You both have emotional skin in the game, and you're sharing back and forth. Create a care map. What's a care map? Write down people, resources, or spaces where you feel seen and supported, and then build rituals of connections through those things. That way you have kind of a regular resource to pull from. The productivity expert, Simon Sinek, talks a lot about, he has a group of friends where he says, no one goes through depression alone. So it's it's not even unspoken. It's a very explicit spoken agreement that if you're depressed, you call one of us and we will talk you through it. 3 a.m, doesn't matter. If I'm on vacation, doesn't matter. You call me, I at least got 5 minutes for you to talk things through. In a way, that's creating a care map, right? A book of resources that you can pull on when you need. Remember, strength is not the absence of need. It's the courage to honor your need. There was a great cartoon. I mentioned this in a prior podcast. I believe it was Calvin and Hobbes. I might be mistaken, but it works for the sake of the story. And Calvin turns to Hobbes and says, what is the most courageous word in the English language? And Hobbes says, help. Help is the most courageous word because it admits that you can't go it alone. And it's an act of freaking courage to reach out for help when you need it. So again, strength is not the absence of need. It's the courage to honor that need. So we're at a place now. Let me leave you with some closing thoughts and leave you with this. Kind of in summation, the strongest people aren't those who never fall. Remember our definition of resilience. The strongest people are not those who never fall. They're the ones who learn how to rise with support. You don't have to earn rest. You don't have to apologize for needing help. You don't have to keep performing strength at the cost of your peace. This week, I want you to ask for help just once. Just try it out. Let it be small. Let it be genuine. Let it be real. And don't get caught up on the other person's response. Remember, you asking for help is practicing micro receiving. You are practicing a new muscle that you have not used before, especially if this podcast is speaking to you, right? If you're one of the strong ones that never lets up, that is always on point, that always has to be there. If this podcast is really directed at you, remember practicing that micro receiving and asking for help this week. It's really not about how they respond. It's about you practicing the act so you can get more comfortable doing it. Okay. So let it be real. Let it be small. And if someone you know is always the strong one, maybe it isn't you. Maybe it's your partner. Maybe it's a loved one. If they're always the strong one, check on them. Not with how are you, but how are you really? How are you really doing? And how can I support you? Those are the key questions. And then, my God, stand back and shut the hell up and listen and be present. Because when we share strength, we build something far more powerful than performance. We build resilience. If this episode resonated, subscribe, leave a review, and send it to someone who could use it. In my next episode, I'm going to begin a 4-part series, The Beginner's Guide to Navigating Separation and Divorce. It will include these 4 basic topics: waking up to reality and identifying when there is a problem, how to separate with grace, rebuilding yourself after separation, and co-parenting with grace. I hope you join us. You're not going to want to miss these episodes and the key insights that they offer. Remember, insight without action changes nothing. If you're ready to turn awareness into movement and stress into strategy, coaching can be the catalyst. Coaching will change you. Reach out to set up a free consultation. You can find me at www.theunstressedexec.com or on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, all under the same handle, The Unstressed Exec. Let's create real momentum, starting now. Until next time, I'm Dr. George Vergolias, The Unstressed Exec. Thanks for listening. See you next time. And remember, shift happens.